All right, when you think of China, maybe you picture sprawling plains,
Right.
nor those huge buzzing megacities. But here's something that often surprises people. Did you know that 5 of the world's 10 highest peaks, all towering over 8,000 meters, are actually in China? Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your sources and really dig into them, unearthing those nuggets of knowledge. Today, our mission is to peel back the layers of China's just immense and really intricate geography. We're going to unlock the key insights from the material you've provided us with and hopefully show how this land isn't just, mountains and rivers. It's the crucible that forged a whole civilization.
Exactly. And what's truly fascinating when you look at China is realizing how it's, well, unique landscape, from those incredible mountains to its life-giving rivers and vast plains, hasn't just shaped its physical form. It's profoundly influenced its history, its culture, and even, its modern political dynamics.
Yeah.
We'll try and trace how these natural features have defined civilizations, created wealth, and sometimes even led to conflict over millennia.
Okay, so let's start with a core concept then, something that really helps visualize this huge country. China's terrain, it's often described as a three-step staircase. So imagine you're standing way out in the far west. That's the highest step, right? Around 4 kilometers above sea level. Then you move eastward and you kind of descend to these raised steppe zones, north and center. They sit at what, 1 to 2 kilometers?
About that.
And then finally, you reach the fertile eastern plains, just, 200 to 400 meters above sea level. And this is where almost all of China's enormous population lives, like an immediate visual for why everyone's concentrated there.
It really is. And that fact you started with about the 5 highest peaks, that just underlines the sheer diversity. It's easy to forget that while, most people are on the plains, China is fundamentally a very mountainous country. Even in those eastern plains that seem flat, mountains top up, and they can be surprisingly prominent, often defining whole regions.
That makes perfect sense. And it leads us right to those specific mountain ranges, doesn't it? They aren't just landmarks. They've often served as like nature's own walls, crucial boundaries shaping climate, culture, everything. We absolutely have to start with the Himalayas. I mean, they form Tibet's southern border. The scale is just mind-boggling. 2,400 kilometers long, 200 to 300 wide, average height over 6 kilometers. But what really struck me from the sources was how incredibly young they are. Geologically speaking, of course, still growing by more than a centimeter a year.
It's astounding, isn't it? Like watching geology happen.
Yeah.
At above 4 kilometers, the air thins out so much. Life gets extremely difficult. It gives them this almost alien feel. Now, Everest, of course, or Chomolungma, locally is shared between Nepal and China. Yeah. But this huge range, it doesn't just divide land. It's one of the starkest climatic boundaries on Earth. It completely blocks those warm, wet monsoons coming up from the Indian Ocean. Yeah. So you get these lush, wet tropics on the southern slopes, but north in Tibet, harsh, dry lands. Yeah, and this directly impacts, well, everything. Agriculture, where people can live. Yeah. It even defines those smaller Himalayan states like Nepal, Bhutan, and the disputed Sikkim region. The insight really is how one massive physical barrier can dictate the very conditions for life on either side.
Fascinating, like creating two completely different worlds side by side. Okay, moving north then, we hit the Tian Shan, another huge west to east range. Stretches 2,500 kilometers total, right, with about 1,500 of that inside China, and heights up to 3 to 5 kilometers.
Right, and this one's another key climatic divider. To its south, you've got the Taklamakan Desert. And it's there precisely because those cold Siberian winds just can't get across these mountains. You can actually see the contrast. The northern slopes, they're forested, get more moisture, but the southern slopes are just sun-baked rock, relying totally on meltwater from glaciers.
Right.
And then north of the Tian Shan is the Zungarian Basin. That's more of a steppe nomadic, less harsh. So what this shows is how these mountains carved out completely different ways of life, supporting farming here, defining nomadic routes there, a real geographical fault line for human activity.
Then there are the Kunlun Mountains, often called the Spine of Asia, I read. They run parallel to the Himalayas and Tian Shan, stretching 2,000 kilometers from the Pamirs. Variable width, but soaring up to 5, even 7 kilometers high. Lots of glaciers, too, vital for water.
Yeah, they're massive. But beyond the physical presence, the Kunlun have this really interesting mythological connection. In ancient Chinese myths, these were legendary mountains way out west, home to the Queen Mother of the West, apparently, and her peaches of immortality.
Huh. Peaches of immortality.
Right. And the name just got applied to this specific range later as Chinese influence pushed westward. It shows how deeply geography gets woven into culture and stories. And it's worth mentioning, historical figures like the Russian explorer Przhevalsky. He helped map the eastern ridges, adding this layer of scientific discovery onto the ancient mystique.
That's a great example how geography shapes even the imagination.
Mm.
Okay, let's turn eastward towards the Greater Khingan Range. The Western Khingan runs north-northeast, forming the border between Mongolia and Manchuria, about 1,200 kilometers long, maybe 1.5 kilometers high on average.
Hmm. And another significant climate player? It helps make Manchuria cold, yes, but relatively moist. While the Mongolian steppes just to the west are much, much drier. It's also China's largest forest massive. Still pretty wild today, quite imposing. And here's where it gets interesting culturally. The sources mention this figure in Chinese literature, the Chinese trapper. Yeah, someone hunting tigers, looking for ginseng roots in these forests. A character totally different from the usual Chinese farmer or artisan, right? It's sort of symbolizes the untamed, wild nature of this specific landscape. A wilderness that still captures the imagination.
That's a powerful image, a glimpse into a different side of China. Now, what about the Yin Mountains? They're nestled along the Great Bend of the Yellow River, more modest in size, I gather.
They are, yeah. Maybe 1,200 kilometers long, 1 to 2 kilometers high. But their function has been absolutely crucial. They act as a watershed, separating the Yellow River basin from rivers flowing north into the steppe. And they also act as a shield, protecting the lands south from those cold northern winds. But what's really fascinating is their history as this fluctuating border zone between nomadic cultures and China. You can actually find sections of the Great Wall following their contours. It shows how the landscape wasn't just passive, it was actively used to define where the border lay, reflecting shifting power dynamics.
Amazing. And finally, for the mountains, we reached the Qinling Range, right in central China, about 1,500 kilometers long, 2 to 3 kilometers high, and home to that famously sharp peak, Mount Huashan, in its foothills.
Yes, and these mountains are incredibly significant for several reasons. First, they're a major climatic boundary. They clearly separate North and South China. They mark that transition from temperate to subtropical climates. They also divide the two great river basins, the Yellow River and the Yangtze.
Okay.
But beyond climate, they were historically important as like imperial hunting grounds. And even today, a big chunk of the wild panda population lives there, a testament to their remaining wildness. So the key takeaway is how one range can define so many fundamental divides, climate, rivers, even culture, given the differences between North and South China.
Right. From soaring peaks, let's shift our focus now to China's vast deserts. They cover over 2 million square kilometers. That's, more than 9% of the country? And most of these really formidable landscapes are found way out west. Let's start with maybe the most emblematic one, the Taklamakan Desert, right in the heart of the Tarim Basin. It's huge. 1,000 kilometers east-west, 400 north-south, 327,000 square kilometers. And it's got those classic, cinematic dune landscapes, including singing dunes, which are apparently a tourist thing now.
They are. But the really profound insight here is how this seemingly empty desert was central to, well, one of the most important economic and cultural things in world history, the Silk Road.
Yeah.
Caravans couldn't cross it directly, right? So they were forced to skirt around the edges, moving between chains of oases.
Oh.
And this constraint, tough as it was, made those oases incredibly wealthy trading hubs, centers of intense cultural exchange, merchants, missionaries, adventurers, all converging there for centuries. It's also worth noting the soil itself is fertile, but desertification has been happening for like 1,000 years. So many former oases are now uninhabitable, which ironically is great for archaeologists finding abandoned ancient sites perfectly preserved by the dryness.
Incredible, a harsh desert becoming a crossroads. And speaking of oases, let's dive into the Turpan Oasis. You see it as this bright green spot on the map. It's one of the lowest places on Earth, right? 154 meters below sea level. You can imagine the heat. Sources say rain can actually evaporate before it even hits the ground there. How do people manage?
It's sheer human ingenuity. They survive by managing water incredibly carefully. Water from melting Tian Shan glaciers. They use these ancient systems called karas, basically underground tunnels that minimize evaporation. Every drop counts.
Wow.
And the local economy. Turpan is famous for its grapes. Historically, winemaking too. Though today, the memorable image is apparently mountains of raisins. Cultural practices changed, grape growing continued, but less wine. It's a place that really shows adaptation.
Pretty amazing adaptation, isn't it? Okay, next up, the Gobi Desert. Partly in China, partly Mongolia. It's less harsh than the Taklamakan, I understand.
So generally, yes.
Yeah.
But historically, for the Chinese, it was just a desert. They even marked it like a sea on old maps. But what's really striking and concerning is the Gobi's expansion. recently. Much of it was actually steppe, grassland just 50 or 60 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. Human activities, specifically misguided farming policies pushing into unsuitable areas and really bad overgrazing, caused rapid desertification. And this isn't some distant problem. It affects Beijing directly. Dust storms are possible almost any time of year now, severely hitting visibility, air quality. It highlights this critical, ongoing environmental challenge for China today, where past decisions have very visible consequences now.
A modern problem with historical roots. And we should just mention there's also the Dzungarian Gobi, a third desert, less prominent, but it contributes to Xinjiang having those two large, empty areas on the map.
Okay, from the harshness of deserts, let's shift our gaze east to China's plains. They cover 1.12 million square kilometers. That's nearly half the area of the deserts. Yet this is where, 95% of China's population lives?
Yep.
An incredible concentration.
Yeah.
And these are alluvial plains, right, formed by river deposits, making them incredibly fertile and amazingly self-renewing.
Absolutely crucial. They're just ideal for human settlement, intensive agriculture, basically the cradles of Chinese civilization.
Let's look at the northeastern plain first. The Manchurian Plain, largest one in China, 350,000 square kilometers. Known for its Siberian winters, think carbon ice festivals, but also surprisingly hot summers. And its soil, this Chernozem-rich, black, super fertile stuff, makes it China's main wheat granary, which is interesting because it has a relatively short agricultural history. Active Chinese settlement only really took off in the last century or so. It also became a major industrial region thanks to Japanese investment before WWII, a legacy the PRC inherited. It was once called China's Chelyabinsk, a heavy industrial heartland. Shows how fast a region can transform.
Right. Then we have the North China Plain, sometimes called the Great China Plain, formed by the Yellow River and the Hai River. Historically, it's quite young, geologically speaking, emerged from ancient swamps.
And what's key here is its role as the most densely populated region and China's main granary, thanks mainly to that fertile loess, that fine wind-blown silt carried by the Yellow River. It constantly renews the soil, making it incredibly productive year after year.
Further south, the Middle and Lower Yangtze Plain, about 200,000 square kilometers. This is the main rice region, isn't it, where rice cultivation actually started.
That's right. And it benefits from just abundant water from the massive Yangtze River, plus a subtropical climate. Basically no winter. All that makes it one of the most productive agricultural regions anywhere in the world, capable of supporting an incredibly dense population. It's almost perfect conditions for intense human development.
Then there are a couple of smaller but historically important plains. The Ordos Plain, or Hetao, 25,000 square kilometers, and the Wei River Valley, Guangzhong, 36,000 square kilometers.
Yeah, smaller, but they carry real historical weight. The Ordos was this constant battleground between Chinese states and nomadic cultures. Shows that frontier dynamic. The Wei River Valley, known as amongst the passes, was highly defensible. Many early Chinese states started there. It was like a secure base for expansion thanks to natural fortifications. So these show how geography didn't just shape climate, it directly shaped dynastic power.
And finally, the Chengdu Plain, just 6,000 square kilometers in Sichuan, famous for its distinct culture and that famously spicy food.
Exactly. And it was historically quite isolated. Access used to be limited to these narrow mountain paths or really treacherous river travel. And that isolation definitely contributed to his unique identity, its cuisine, everything. It evolved kind of independently for centuries. Modern transport has connected it now, of course. But that history of isolation really left its mark on the culture.
Okay, let's talk rivers now. You called them the bloodlines of a civilization earlier, and that feels right. Fundamentally important. I'm thinking about that concept of hydraulic civilizations, where large rivers, especially ones that flood and renew the soil, well, they make sedentary life possible, that transition to farming.
Precisely. And this raises a key question for understanding early states.
Yeah.
Why do rivers foster complex societies? Well, large-scale irrigation, flood control projects, they require coordinated labor, a huge group effort that provides a really clear incentive for people to work together, form larger, more organized groups, societies, basically. And it's also interesting, most major Chinese rivers flow west to east, unlike many in Europe. And that west-east flow historically helped communication and trade within China, connecting different regions. Globally, China actually ranks third in total water discharge. Just emphasizes the scale of its river systems.
That makes sense. Cooperation for survival leads to organization. Let's start with an interesting type. An endorheic river, that's one that doesn't flow to the sea, right? The Tarim River, 2,177 kilometers long, flows north of the Taklamakan, fed by glaciers.
Right. And this river used to feed a really fascinating, almost mythical place, Lob Nor, the Wandering Lake. It was this unique, isolated ecosystem, had its own distinct fish, bird species, even tribes of professional fishermen living entirely off its waters. A real marvel. Tragically, yeah. Diversion for irrigation upstream, and later nuclear weapons testing in the area. Basically caused its demise. It's a really stark illustration of human impact on fragile ecosystems.
What a loss. Okay, now for the giants, the Yangtze River. Chengjiang, the Long River. It is truly immense, 6,300 kilometers long. Its basin covers 1.8 million square kilometers. That's 19% of China's total area. And remarkably, it contains a quarter of all of China's arable land. The discharge is enormous. The mouth is like 80 to 90 kilometers wide.
Just staggering numbers. And on the Yangtze course, you have the Three Gorges Dam, world's largest hydroelectric power station. It's undeniably an engineering marvel, a symbol of China's ambition with infrastructure. But as you hinted at earlier, projects this big always come with costs, significant environmental and human costs, like the loss of unique wildlife, certain sturgeons, paddlefish, river dolphins, and its impact downstream, altering water flows for hundreds of millions. It's that complex balance, progress, and consequence.
A crucial point, yeah, that dual nature. Next, the Yellow River, Honghe, 5,464 kilometers long. Its basin is smaller than the Yangtze's, but has a higher percentage of arable land. It's famous for that color, right? Carrying up to 40 kilos of loess per cubic meter. It looks like liquid mud.
It really does. And this river poses a unique set of, well, challenges. For one thing, the Yellow River often doesn't even reach the sea anymore, hasn't reliably since 1972, making it a critical but failing water source for North China. And that silt, it raises the riverbed by about 10 centimeters every year. So the river actually flows above the surrounding plains in many places.
I love the plains, wow.
Yeah. Which means when the dikes breach, catastrophic floods. Historically, these floods often triggered peasant rebellions, because a ruler failing to control the river was seen as losing legitimacy, the mandate of heaven. Think about the constant work involved. Just maintaining irrigation ponds needs nonstop dredging because they silt up so fast. There's that huge ongoing project now to divert Yangtze water north to try and replenish the Yellow River. That really underlines the severe water deficit in North China. And it also explains China's interest in water sources beyond its borders, like Lake Baikal.
Sounds like a constant high-stakes battle with nature. We should briefly note the Huai River, too, 813 kilometers, often served as an internal north-south border historically. Okay, then down south, the Pearl River, Yujiang, 2,200 kilometers long, located in one of China's rainiest regions. It has 8 times the discharge of the Yellow River.
Immense flow. And historically, it was hugely important as a major trade route, connecting the internal southern provinces out to the sea. It was the lifeblood of commerce and culture for that region, much like the Yellow and Yangtze were for their areas.
And looking bigger picture now, it's striking how many major Asian rivers actually start in China, specifically on the Tibetan Plateau. We're talking the Red River in Vietnam, the Mekong through Southeast Asia, the Salween in Thailand and Burma, the Brahmaputra in India, the Indus in Pakistan. They all start there.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here, and a very powerful insight for geopolitics, is the leverage this gives China. By controlling the headwaters, China can, in theory at least, divert or restrict water flow to its downstream neighbors. This whole concept is known as hydraulic politics. And this capability, maybe once just potential, is now a really significant diplomatic factor. It impacts international relations right across Asia, fundamentally reshapes regional power dynamics.
That's a huge point. Water is power. Let's finish rivers with something human-made but incredible. The Grand Canal, Yunhe the Transport River, 1,800 kilometers long, built mainly way back in the late 6th century, connecting the lower Yangtze to the lower Yellow River and then extending north to Beijing.
Its historical significance is just immense. It literally allowed ocean-going ships to reach Beijing, the Mongol capital. Until railways came along, it was China's primary trade artery. And here's a thought. Despite the Great Wall's fame, you could argue the Grand Canal was China's most important structure, practically speaking. Generated far more benefit by linking the economic heartlands.
That's a really interesting perspective.
And it's still partly navigable today. And significantly, it's being used right now for that Yangtze to Yellow River water diversion project. Shows its continued strategic importance.
Puts the Grand Canal in a whole new light. Okay, briefly on lakes. Let's start with Qinghai Lake, Koko Nor, Largest saltwater lake, 4,317 square kilometers, up in northeastern Tibet.
And its current situation is quite telling. Apparently, 80% of the rivers that used to feed it no longer reach it because of irrigation upstream. Its water level is dropping by about 3 centimeters a year. It's become this stark symbol of China's water management challenges and the pressures on its resources.
Another worrying sign. And the three largest freshwater lakes. Poyang Lake, 3,200 square kilometers, but its level fluctuates wildly now because of the Three Gorges Dam. Dongting Lake, 2,820 square kilometers, once home to unique species. And Tai Lake, 2,250 square kilometers, famously beautiful, celebrated in poetry.
Right, those are the big ones.
Okay, let's transition now to how China is divided up administratively. What's interesting is that unlike many countries, China's place names, the toponyms, are remarkably stable. Many trace back to ancient or medieval times, so knowing them is kind of like having a living historical map in your head. China currently has 31 main divisions, 23 provinces counting Taiwan, 5 autonomous regions, 4 municipalities, and 2 special administrative regions.
Let's start with those special administrative regions, the SARs. Hong Kong, Zhanggang, and Macau, Oman, former British and Portuguese colonies, returned to China in 97 and 99, respectively. And they operated under that one country, two systems idea, promised a high degree of autonomy for 50 years.
Right. They definitely had, and still have, a unique status. Separate currencies, borders with the mainland, historically more freedoms like press freedom, those antique markets. But that promise of autonomy, especially for Hong Kong, has been a huge point of discussion lately, hasn't it?
It certainly has. Those new national security laws brought in during the pandemic have significantly curtailed Hong Kong's autonomy. It raises serious questions about the future of one country, two systems, as it was originally laid out. The key takeaway, I think, is understanding that while these changes are a major shift, Hong Kong does still keep certain distinctions, and, importantly, still has more freedoms than the mainland. But the direction of its autonomy is clearly different now.
Okay. Then the 4 municipalities. These are often called direct-controlled cities. You got Beijing, the capital, Shanghai, right at the mouth of the Yangtze, Tianjin, historically Beijing's port, and Chongqing, this massive, almost province-sized city in eastern Sichuan. It was specifically made a municipality because of the Three Gorges Dam project.
Exactly. They're not just cities. They're huge urban centers with large surrounding regions, like mini provinces themselves.
Then we have the 5 autonomous regions. These were set up for major national minorities, kind of based on the Soviet model. Includes the Tibetan Autonomous Region, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, Inner Mongolia, Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region, and Ningxia Hui Autonomous Region.
Right. And what's really striking here is the gap between the idea of autonomy for these regions and the reality on the ground. They were meant to foster, national cultural development for those groups. But over time, their autonomy has been gradually eroded. For example, education. Some minorities used to have extensive schooling in their own languages. Now that's being cut back, replaced more and more with Mandarin, especially in Xinjiang and Tibet. You could see it as a sort of logical next step in their integration into the wider Chinese state from Beijing's perspective. But for the local people, it means huge cultural shifts.
Right. Okay, and now, the big one, the 23 provinces. Now, for you listening, trying to remember all these can seem daunting, but there's a simple trick, a kind of mnemonic, that helps with a lot of them. You just need to combine 4 directions: north, Bei, east, Dong, west, Shi, south, Nan, with just 3 geographic words: river, He, mountain, Shan, and lake, Huyu. Plus maybe a southern version of river, Jiang, and passes, Guan?
It's surprisingly effective.
It really is. Let me show you with some pairs. Take He for river, the Yellow River, usually. You get Hebi, north of the river, and Henan, south of the river. See? North and south of the Yellow River.
It's cool when you see it like that.
Exactly. Now, Shan, for mountain. There's Shandong, east of the mountain, often referring to a sacred peak like Taishan, and Shaanxi, west of the mountain. And then there's Shaanxi Tricky One, pronounced differently, but same character, meaning west of the passes. Easy to mix those up.
Very easy, even for people familiar with China.
Okay, Hufur Lake, usually Dongting Lake. You get Hubei, north of the lake, and Hunan, south of the lake, again, north and south. Then Guang, which relates to the Pearl River mouth area. You have Guangxi, which is an autonomous region, and Guangdong, east of Guang. And lastly, Jiang for river, but this time referring to the Yangtze. There's Jiangsu along the lower Yangtze and Jiangxi west of Jiang.
That covers quite a few of the core provinces right there.
It does, and knowing those patterns makes the map feel much less random. Of course there are others. Qinghai, named after the lake, used to be part of Tibet. Gansu, that long intestine-shaped corridor along the Silk Road. Sichuan means four rivers. Yunnan is the tropical southwest with elephants. And the three northeastern provinces. Heilongjiang, Black Dragon River, the Amur. Jilin, from a Manchu word, and Liaoning, a newer pacified name.
And knowing these names, these toponyms, as you said, is just so valuable. For understanding Chinese history, following the news, even just chatting with people, they give you immediate geographical and historical context. That helps you orient yourself. It's fascinating, too. Even modern car license plates often use single characters that come from ancient state names from thousands of years ago. Shows how deep these historical markers run. The past is literally written on the present landscape.
So as you can hopefully tell by now, China's geography is just this place of immense scale and incredible diversity. From soaring peaks to life-giving rivers, sprawling plains, and understanding this landscape isn't just about, knowing locations on a map. It's really key to understanding China's past, its present, and its future.
Yeah, this deep dive really shows how China's geography isn't just a passive backdrop. It's been, and still is, an active force shaping its civilization. So for you, our listener, maybe here's something important to think about. As China keeps growing, keeps developing at this incredible pace, how will its relationship with its fundamental physical geography continue to evolve? The rivers that nourish it, the mountains that define it, the deserts that challenge it. How will that relationship change, especially with climate change adding pressure and increasing demands from its population? What new geographical challenges and maybe opportunities lie ahead for China?
That's a great question to ponder. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel a little more well-informed and maybe inspired to keep exploring.